So I've added the level or the step of experience, as I said before, and it still lines up with the letters a cappella, which is nice. Yes, and we said that advertising is there to influence awareness among prospects. Now, when we talk about choosing a prospect or defining what a prospect is, companies with existing business have a real advantage if they have a database or they have research about who their best customers are. And this is a major topic of database marketing and direct marketing, which I also teach. And what a company does is to run analyses in the database, looking at transaction history, looking at profitability of customers to try to find people who buy the most across the most different product categories and complain the least. Okay, so the ones who are really, really good customers, those are the customers you want to attract. And you can find out demographics and psychographics. You can do that through your own database and your own surveys. You can also do it using external databases, to find out what sort of zip codes they live in, their education level, their age, psychographics. You could find out their political persuasion or any hobbies they may have. The more you know about these most valuable customers, the better you'll be able to target your prospecting. An example here is a friend of mine was in charge of the database marketing and analysis for a company called JetSmarter. And JetSmarter was like an Uber for corporate jets. So you could book yourself a seat on a corporate jet that was nearby you and would take you on a trip and where you wanted to go. And you had to, I think, put down $15,000 or $20,000 for your membership in JetSmarter, and then you could have an app on your phone and call them up when you needed them. Now, obviously, this is not for people who are not of means. You've got to have significant resources, etc. So one of the things that my friend Paul found when they took their top customers and looked at external databases was that these people subscribed to lots of skiing publications and bought lots of skiing equipment. So there was a correlation between skiing and being a good customer of JetSmarter. So what does Paul do when he wants to find new customers for JetSmarter? Well, he advertises in skiing publications and skiing websites. Okay, that's just an example of what we're talking about. So defining the ideal prospect. Now, if it's a new product or service, like Slave Play, for instance, is not completely new, but at one point it was new. You've got to use some judgment as opposed to consulting your own database to try to decide who's the ideal prospect to buy a ticket. But you need to support your judgment with facts every way you can. This is a very crucial step in building a media plan, making sure you have the right target and you've justified it, number one, and number two, really understanding your target. Who is this person? Sometimes you have a primary target and a secondary target. Usually you don't have much more than that. Otherwise, it tends to destroy focus. Okay, so once you choose your target and justified that and shown that you understand the target, you now need to go to selecting the right types of media to reach the target. And to do that, you're going to consult research. You're going to look at studies that are available. And there are a number of studies. Simmons is a big one, lifestyle studies. It breaks people down by demographics and education and all kinds of things and talks about their propensity to watch cable or certain kinds of programs, whether, wrestling, what kind of cars do they have? Do they have trucks? What's their income level? What's their education? But you can then run, you can find out from some of this research what types of media they're exposed to. Do they watch a lot of TV? What kinds of TV do they watch? They listen to the radio. So you can also, by the way, look at a media journey. And this is a kind of a classic way that some agencies will create a selection of media types for to reach a target prospect. So they talk in detail about the prospect so you can visualize her, and then you're going to go through her typical day. Okay, what does she listen to when she or look at when she wakes up in the morning? Does she turn on TV while she has her Special K and her skim milk? What does she watch? What's her route to work? Is she driving? If so, where's the business center that she would work at, and where's the type of neighborhood she's going to live in? Is she where the route she's going to take? What out of home does she, or is she commuting? What about in the office? Does she listen to radio or have something in the background? What does she do when she gets home at night? What kind of TV does she watch? Can we reach her that way? Does she go to the gym? Is there a digital out-of-home place-based network in her gym? So these are all approaches and ways to try to figure out what media types and what specific media does the target listen to or see, hear, and touch. All right, so at the same time, you're also having to clearly define your communication goals. What percent of your target audience needs to see the message at least one time? And you remember, by the way, we haven't talked about these too much, but way back when we first had some lectures that you looked at, we defined some very important media terms like impressions and reach and frequency and GRPs and TRPs and circulation and monthly uniques, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where all this comes back into play when we start to build a media plan. So reach is what percentage of the target audience is exposed to the ad over normally a 4-week period. Frequency, as you'll remember, is the average number of times that someone in the target audience is exposed. Some people may be 10, some people may be 1 time. What's the average? GRPs is gross rating points, and it's reach minus the percentage. In other words, it's just the number of the reach. It's not expressed as a percentage, just a raw number times frequency equals GRPs. What are my GRP goals? Normally, if I'm trying to build awareness for something and I have a short time frame, I need to build awareness fast. And I would, by the way, think it's plausible that you might want to build some fast reach to sell these extra tickets. You don't have 2 years to launch this thing. It's got to happen fast. When a new film comes out, and they've got a weekend to either be a hit or be a flop, they need to get a lot of reach against that target audience very fast, within a week or two. And they're going to be everywhere, right? That's building reach fast reach build. So what are the timing considerations, the calendar considerations? When do you have to have your 70% or 80% reach by? And then, of course, you got geographic considerations. Is this a regional thing? Is this certain markets? Is it national? What is it? Now, in the case of our play, Slave Play, it's obviously it's in the New York area. So your advertising is going to run in the New York area, and you're going to reach tourists, if that's your goal, in the New York area as well, Okay, so you set up some parameters, some kind of, this is the reality that this plan has to live in. It's got to reach people in a certain geography. It's got to accomplish things by a certain date, etc. All right, and now I've chosen my target. I've justified and supported it. I understand the target. I've chosen some initial media that I think line up pretty well. I know what my goals are in terms of reach and frequency. Obviously, I have a budget too. That's another constraint, right? Now I'm going to try to choose among media and prioritize. And here I can do it based on CPM. Remember, this is one of the ways we differentiate among media types. So what's the most efficient way to reach my target? Here I'm using some science and some numbers, some crunching. By the way, if I start to, obviously a media plan is going to combine different media. So the reach and frequency you're looking at has got to be a combination of what you're achieving when you add up all these media. I mean, you can look at what each separate medium does in terms of how many people it reaches and what the frequency is, but then you're going to have to find a way to figure out what are the duplicate audiences among different types of media and figure all that out. Now, by the way, normally agencies have computers that do these things for you, but we're going to have to at least understand the concept as we put our plan together. So how do different media types work together? How do they add reach? How do they build frequency? What's the overlap? Now, by the way, this is lifted directly from your book, and I know some of this is cut off again, and I apologize. Let me see if I can expand this. Probably not. Well, is it going to let me? Whoop, whoop. Hold on here, guys. Okay, I'm sorry. It doesn't look like I really can. But this is an example of duplicated audience that we just talked about. Okay, so Time Magazine, People Magazine, which Time is now owned by the guy who founded Salesforce.com. I think People is at Meredith. They're not at Time Inc. anymore. Anyway, so let's say Time Magazine reaches 10% of your target and People reaches 15% of your target. But you know, there's some people who read both Time and People. And so it says here that there's a 6% overlap. So what is your total reach by adding Time and People together? Well, it's 10 plus 15% minus 6% equals 19%. That's your total. That's the total percentage of your target audience that you'll reach. And what's the effect on frequency? Well, with 19% reach, that means 81% of your target audience have zero frequency. And this is the part you can't see, and I apologize. Actually, 1% has 13% frequency. 2% has 6% frequency. And 13 and 6 equals 19. 19 and 81 equals 100%. So now you've figured out your frequency distribution and your reach for adding two things together. This is another example of some media math. So let's say your total target is 1 million. Your target audience reached by a specific medium is 100,000. How many times each person potentially exposed is 1 when you make your buy? Say it's a magazine again. So how many impressions are you going to deliver? So it's reach times how many times they're exposed to an ad. It's 100,000. You get 100,000 impressions. So 100,000 people see something one time. That's 100,000 impressions. Reach is a percentage. So reach is your total audience divided by the audience for the medium. So that's 100,000 divided, or excuse me, 1 million divided by 100,000. That's 10%. You've got a 10% reach. 100,000 people saw it. Your total target's 1 million. It's 10% reach. Your frequency is 1. So what are your GRPs? 10 times 1 equals 10 GRPs. Now, another key issue other than the numbers. So here, that's the science side of building a media plan with cost per thousands and reaches and frequencies and adding all up the numbers and kind of seeing what you accomplish against your audience. But then there's the artistic side, the creative side. And then one of the things this has to take account of is what is your creative? You need to see what the creative looks like. If you tell them it looks like we're buying these media types, and the agency creative department then goes and creates creative, you need to get a feeling for it to see what works. If something is really good, what impression quality is the best fit for the creative? There's Jackson Pollock going wild there, creating something, and that's kind of what you're doing. You're making a painting. You're building something here. So it's a combination of science and art. It's got these practical considerations too, as I said, geographical, seasonal, momentum. You want to build some momentum, budget, and lead times. And now I'm going to stop and we'll pick